Hello and welcome. I'm Bonnie Mincu, Senior Certified ADHD Coach and founder of Thrive with ADD. And you're listening to ADHD Self Mastery. My mission is to help adults with traits of ADD or ADHD become the confident master of their own lives without feeling sabotaged by frustrating traits or tendencies. In the first episode, Who's Driving Your Brain? I introduced the metaphor of thinking of your brain as a private bus with 8 different characters aboard. And at any time, any one of those characters could grab the steering wheel and start driving. Steady Eddie is the driver who's calm and steady. He stays the route. He gets you where you need to go without unnecessary side trips. When Steady Eddie is driving, you're in a state of self-mastery. But when you find your plans or intentions derailed and you can't get started at all, it's because a different driver is at the wheel, perhaps flooding the engine, driving into a ditch, or going off route and getting you completely lost. Most of us with ADHD are likely to have one or more of these other problematic drivers showing up as dominant more often than we'd like. See which ones you relate to the most. There's disorganized Derek, who creates a state of disorganization, but could have been set off by another driver. Which other driver makes all the difference in the kind of solution you need? Impatient Iggy creates disorganization and other chaos because she doesn't want to bother putting things away. Her impatient nature causes you to cut corners, which often leads to more time-consuming problems later. Helpless Hannah drives when there's something you don't know and it causes you to stall rather than take action to find out what to do. She can set off disorganized Derek if she doesn't know how to organize and just puts things in random places where you can't find them. Critical Calvin leads to analysis paralysis by overanalyzing, and this can cause you to second guess yourself. He also drives perfectionist tendencies, but his most damaging tendency is towards self-criticism and self-blame. And on that bus, he often sits next to emotional M.A, causing shame, fear, or anxiety. And she's an especially detrimental driver if you're susceptible to toxic shame. When we come back from a short break, I'll introduce you to the character who's represented by a small child, though she's one of the most powerful drivers for many ADHD adults. Would you like to determine who your most dominant drivers are? Take my little quiz, Who Drives Your Bus, at thrivewithadd.com/quiz. That's thrivewithadd.com/quiz.
Do your ADHD tendencies get in the way of you doing what you intend to? Traditional strategies for getting things done may not work for you. You need solutions tailored for your unique brain. In Bonnie Mincu's training membership program, Productivity Pathfinder, learn ADHD self-mastery step-by-step at your own pace in a supportive community with live online options each week. Learn more about Productivity Pathfinder at thrivewithadd.com.
Welcome back to ADHD Self-Mastery. I'm Bonnie Mincu, and we just went over most of the characters who could grab the wheel of a metaphorical private bus that represents your brain. Now, it's important to realize in this metaphor that these characters riding your bus are not intended to represent you. They're strictly internal, influencing your thoughts, assumptions, or mood, and perhaps as a consequence, driving your actions. But you're the owner of the bus. And although you may not yet be exercising this power, it's up to you to decide who gets to drive. There's another very powerful character on the bus of most people with traits of ADD or ADHD. She's represented by a small child, maybe a toddler going through the terrible twos. She's the one who drives when you're experiencing pure procrastination, and I call her Whiny Winnie. Whiny Winnie whines, "I don't feel like it," when called upon to do something she considers tedious or boring. When she takes over the driver's seat, she refuses to even turn the key in the ignition. How does that show up in your actions? Well, you're probably not actually whining, but you're procrastinating. You could be an executive who puts off calling a difficult client just because you don't feel like dealing with them at the moment. The person you show to others is a polished professional, but inside your head, you can imagine a child stamping her foot and saying, "No, I don't want to talk to that annoying client." Procrastination could also show up as stalling. If I'm not in the mood to make a lot of simple updates in my website, I could find myself straightening papers, filing, organizing my desk. Ironically, those activities are ones that I'm normally not at all motivated to do. But when Whiny Winnie takes over, I'd rather do anything other than those website updates. It's important for you to know when Whiny Winnie is driving, to realize when you're simply procrastinating because you don't feel like doing something, rather than being mentally paralyzed and unable to start. Procrastination is caused by lack of motivation. With ADHD, motivation plays a far more important role in our ability to get things done than it does with other people who have a more neurotypical brain. With ADD or ADHD, the neurotransmitters in our brain simply won't focus unless we have some degree of genuine interest or engagement in a task. Without the ability to focus, getting started on something can be like trying to push a boulder uphill. So while procrastination can be seen as an attitude issue, lack of interest or motivation has real physiological impact on our brains. That bratty 2-year-old Whiny Winnie is creating problems for you inside your brain by refusing to drive, but she's throwing that temper tantrum against your will. Most of us with ADHD experience what seems like an inability to get started on a project that we know we should start. Finally, at the last minute, we're able to focus on it and then maybe have to stay up all night to get it done. This may seem like a conscious choice, maybe in college, but as we get older, pulling last minute all nighters is a lot less attractive as a working lifestyle. So you may witness yourself procrastinating and feel bad about it, but still can't get started until panic sets in. What's all that about? Well, to other people observing it, it seems like you're just exercising a bad habit. And you yourself might get down on yourself and feel shame that you can't get started sooner. But unless you're on ADHD medication to normalize the neurotransmitters in your brain, you may be reliant on that last minute adrenaline to finally get focused so you can begin work. And shaming yourself over procrastination is useless and it's counterproductive. Here's a much better approach. When you find yourself not starting something that you know you really need to do, ask yourself why, because you want to determine if you're really procrastinating or whether something else is stopping you. And if that why gives you an answer that's anything other than motivation or an outside situation beyond your control, you're likely experiencing mental paralysis rather than procrastination. And there are lots of different reasons for mental paralysis. They all require different solutions. Being able to put the right solution into place is what ADHD self-mastery is all about. But for now, we'll continue with that procrastination. Usually, a simple lack of motivation to do something comes from one of three reasons. A, it's just simple and boring, and you're not in the mood. B, it's detailed and tedious and demands your concentration. Or C, it requires you to learn something that you're not motivated or interested in learning. For those simple, mundane tasks of life, like household chores, filing, taking out the garbage, or paying bills, you need to get to where you can do them automatically or be able to make them more entertaining to do. Doing simple things automatically without having to deal with Whiny Winnie every time requires having those things become an automatic habit. That involves creating a ritual that you perform regularly, consciously, until it ultimately becomes more unconscious. How to create a successful ritual is another topic, but making mundane tasks more entertaining or stimulating to do is easy. Have something in the background that keeps Winnie engaged or at least satisfied. That might be music, a podcast like this one, an audiobook, a webinar, or you might use the stimulation of a different environment. I always found I focused much better in a public place like Starbucks, where there was some background noise and activity going on that didn't involve me. A lot of people with ADHD focus best that way, which is why so many of us found ourselves really struggling to be productive, having to work at home during the pandemic. If you focus best in a cafe, a library, or even a park bench, you can deliberately save certain tasks to do in that location. Doing taxes is always detailed and tedious work for me, and working somewhere that wasn't too quiet helped my concentration on that kind of work. So every year I took the paperwork part of the taxes to do in my favorite cafe. The amount of background stimulation that works best for your focus can vary widely from one individual to another. And there are plenty of people with ADHD who really cannot focus with any stimulation. They find it too distracting. So you may need to experiment a bit to find out what works best for you on those procrastination-worthy tasks. The most important takeaway from today's episode involved dealing with procrastination. First, for a specific task you can't get started on, ask yourself if you're stalling because you're simply unmotivated or whether there's some other reason you're paralyzed. If you're procrastinating, imagine a small child in your brain who needs entertaining with some kind of background stimulation, and strategically think about what stimulation you'll provide to get the task done. Create an intention for when you're going to start the task, what you need to put in place to do so. And then if you don't start it when you intended, ask yourself why that was to uncover what got in the way. Write those roadblocks down to begin seeing your patterns of what derails you. And they might be represented by other characters driving your bus. Once they're identified, you can learn the solutions and strategies that you need to deal with them, and then you'll be able to move them out and let Steady Eddie drive. There's one very important character on the bus that I haven't brought up yet, and he's probably the one who drives most often nowadays for people with ADHD, and that's overwhelmed Oscar. Our next episode will be dedicated to Oscar and how to gain self-mastery over overwhelm. This is Bonnie Mincu of thrivewithadd.com. To learn which characters are most dominant on your bus or brain, take the quiz Who Drives Your Bus at thrivewithadd.com/quiz. That's THRIVE with ADD.com/quiz. And subscribe to this podcast, ADHD Self-Mastery, for more customized solutions for your unique brain.
Thank you for listening to ADHD Self-Mastery with Bonnie Mincu. Learn more about Bonnie and her Productivity Pathfinder training program for ADHD adults at thrivewithadd.com.